Hey everybody, I wanted to make this video real quick as an addendum to the last one I made regarding the electric universe and the external power source that may be possibly charging or powering our sun. As you know, in the last video that I created, I showed you lots of evidence from several different sources that show, for example, like you're looking at right here, this is about 500 years old, shows the Orion Nebula on the left. You may want to review the last video so you understand where I'm coming from here. But the Orion Nebula on the left, which is the triangle that represents the trapezium in the Orion Nebula, and this is also the symbol for Osiris. It's also the symbol for Jehovah. The reason why these connections are important is because there is cosmology information that you can find inside the Bible and these ancient texts that tell you things about the stars, creation, and stuff like this. So it gives us more information that we can go investigate and prove scientifically. There's a lot of information that steers us in the right direction, though, when we take a look at the symbolism like we see right here. So this area right here represents the Orion Nebula, and as which you can see that it's doing, it's shooting a ray to the sun, and then from the sun we see that this ray is shooting down to Earth. So what we see is that this area is a good chance that, and we saw in the Bible that it also says that it speaks to the sun and it turns off the sun, or it seals up the stars. This is an indication that this area is some kind of an external power source that's charging, or what have you, these stars, including our sun. But there's something else that I thought about regarding all this stuff. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the history of the Orion Nebula, but it's a very strange history. And this article right here is by Harvard, and it's titled, "The Orion Nebula, Where in History Is It?" And the reason it's such an interesting article is because the Orion Nebula has a very sketchy history. It's the only nebula that you can really look up in the sky and you can see with your naked eyes and say, look, there's a fuzzy star, that's the Orion Nebula, and it's very, very bright. If we take a look at the Orion Nebula through certain telescopes, we can see that it is a very, very bright object in our sky. Yet the interesting thing about it all is that it wasn't discovered until 1611. And the whole article that you see right here goes in to the fact that these guys can't figure out how all these people missed it. Galileo, he even he plotted stars. As you can see right here, he plotted stars. This is the Orion constellation. Totally missed it. As did others, and there's not any mention of it at all. So if we take a look, I'll just read this section for you right here. In spite of all this, however, a historical study of the Orion Nebula reveals that it has an exceedingly strange ancestry, which is enshrouded in mystery, as are the trapezium stars, enveloped by the mists of the nebula. T.W. Webb hints of Orion's mysterious past. When continuing on with his comments, he says in full, "One of the most wonderful objects in the heavens, readily visible to the naked eye, yet strangely missed, as Humboldt says, by Galileo, who paid great attention to Orion." The discovery of the Orion Nebula, indeed it seems extremely odd that such a conspicuous object had to be discovered at all. It is not attributed to the Galileo, as we will see later, did indeed pay great attention to the entire constellation of Orion, but its discovery is not credited to Nicolas Perret in the year 1610, slightly more than 1 year after Galileo used his first telescope, during which time Galileo was engaged in writing his Sidereus Nuncius, the sidereal messenger. It seems that no reference to the Orion Nebula having been seen prior to this date by observers in Europe, the Middle East, or the Orient exists. History is in fact totally silent concerning the misty cloud and the sword of Orion before the year 1610. Okay, so I'll go on. I'm not going to read the whole article to you, but I will tell you what they think. They think that, they say right here, they say, in the view of the ease can be seen today by anyone who cares to examine this part of the sky, a strong historical case can be made for the Orion Nebula not to have been visibly shining before 1610, making it less than 400 years old and one of the youngest deep space objects in the sky today. Now that's very odd, that considering how conspicuous and how bright it is today, that it wouldn't have been shining before 1610. It also doesn't really make much sense, because if we take a look in all the history, all the way back a long time ago, the Mayans, the ancient Egyptians, they were referring to the Orion Nebula. So we have this interesting thing or phenomena happening, possibly, where the Orion Nebula brightens and then it darkens. This appears to be happening over history. But here's what I thought. I thought, well, okay, so this whole idea about the powering of our sun from an external source, and this appears to be the Orion Nebula from what we see in the symbolism, as we can see right here. I thought, well, considering the strange history of the Orion Nebula, and what they believe is or at least the word is, that these stars called FU, Orionus stars or something like this, that they somehow brightened really quickly, and it caused the nebula to brighten up. But I don't know that I really buy this. I mean, it could be the case, but I believe there's something else going on here. But nevertheless, if the Orion Nebula was not bright during this period of time, during the area of 1610, 1611, or what have you, then if it's the external power source for our sun, I thought, well, I wonder if this might have anything to do with any kind of a connection or correlation to sunspot history on our sun. So I went to the Thunderbolts forum, and I looked for something on sunspots. It says, how do you explain sunspot moving around the sun? And it says, we as proponents of electric universe view believe that sunspots are indicative of an external current flowing into the photosphere from an external source. Well, so if this is the case, then that means that this external current, if it is the Orion Nebula trapezium, which it appears to be, then if this is what they believe, then it's very possible that the sunspots would be correlated. So I went to take a look at sunspot history to see if I could find out anything about what it looked like over time. I found something very interesting. Right here, just after 1600, probably around 1610 or so like that, we had a burst of sunspots, and then they calmed down. This was the same time that the Orion Nebula apparently brightened and they could see it. So now we have this very interesting chart right here, and it doesn't go back. And this is NASA.gov. We don't see anything before this 1600 mark, but we see a spike, and then we see this gradual increase in sunspots over time. So the question is there any activity or brightness or whatever associated with the Orion Nebula that correlates to this chart? And I'm guessing that there probably is. I bet you that there is some kind of a connection between the Orion Nebula and the trapezium as the external power source, and I bet it correlates to the sunspots on our sun. Something to think about. These are, of course, all theories, but all I'm doing is giving you what I know from my end regarding the Orion Nebula, because this is my area of focus from all of the mysteries and everything else. But I'm going to leave a link to this Harvard article. It's very interesting, the whole idea of this thing. And then, of course, there's almost appears to be this strange conspiracy for some reason behind this thing. Like people were trying to hide it or whatever. I know it sounds crazy, but when you read the Harvard article, you'll see what I'm talking about. You know, we also had, like the Vatican, for example. They hid the Popol Vuh, the Mayan Popol Vuh, which identified the Orion Nebula as what they considered the seat of creation. So that's very interesting, and they found it hidden in a Catholic church altar in Guatemala in the 1500s. So it's a very sketchy history that we have, and then records got lost for a while. If you go to the, I forget the name of the site, seds.org or something like that, that talks about all of the different constellations and things that over history that have been logged. It mentions specifically that the Orion Nebula, that records got lost and that people didn't look at it for 50 years or whatever, which seems very odd considering something that is so conspicuous in the sky, something that would brighten all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden these records would get lost and people wouldn't pay attention to it. But then we find it in all of these cathedrals and stuff. See, this is where the mysteries kind of comes into play, and I know this is not associated with this particular information, because what I'm trying to do is help the scientists guys, but there's more information out there that I know about this that may help with the electric universe and with the science area of this. You know, my hope in all of this would be to see something, a way to merge the mysteries with science in such a way that the mysteries doesn't do anything but maybe lend a way to for science to say, hey, take a look at this. Go check this out. Rather than just randomly testing things, we actually have things in history that say, you know, you might want to go check that out, and that will save the scientific folks a lot of time. Just like I think maybe what we'll find out is that the Orion Nebula is indeed the external power source of the sun, found from ancient symbolism and ancient texts and so forth, because it's all over the place. Anyways, so I hope that's interesting, the whole sunspot thing. There may be a correlation there, so it's up to you guys. Y'all take care. Talk to you soon.